another. Sure, I'm happy to. So, I think in just as a wrap up, I think it's really critical for companies to really look at their overall strategy from an IT perspective earlier on versus later on. Like I said, we see so many companies that end up with 5 to 6 content management systems, 3 to 4 learning management systems. So planning for that early on and having that overall IT roadmap and IT governance to manage the direction that your whole organization is going to go is really critical. So planning for that appropriately early on in your organization before you even get to clinical stage is really critical. And that's going to grow with you and move with you over the upcoming years. So, and then as you start to look at those investments and making those investments, going through a proper vendor selection, looking at what specifically needs to be done, I think that's critical as well, because we see so many companies that implement a point solution that then needs to be ripped out 2 to 3 years later, and they invest millions of dollars into that. So not worth doing. So I think really looking at those things, planning pragmatically, going with a risk-based approach for compliance as well. Not trying to over-engineer compliance. I think those are all key factors in success for IT within these organizations.
Thanks,
Roger, you want to build on that?
I'll jump in.
Take your own thoughts?
No, that was a really good point. I'm gonna highlight. You said don't wait to plan, and make sure you put in a plan quickly and make these decisions systematically. I'm going to say don't wait to become compliant. Remediation is expensive, and if you get 3 or 4 years in and you've gone through a few phases, and then you turn around and you realize that your IT systems don't have any policies, procedures, or validation or anything behind them, the remediation when you're in a panic is expensive and difficult. Whereas establishing an IT compliance program early and building that discipline early in how you implement things and how you impose controls on these systems is not so difficult when you do it early. And certainly now with the new CSA guidance, it's a friendlier approach for a smaller organization, and the emphasis is on testing and compliance as opposed to on documentation, and that's a great evolution for smaller companies. So my response would be don't wait. Establish the framework, the discipline, and get your organization used to working that way. It doesn't have to be as burdensome as you think, and it's the right thing to do in terms of having your organization build its capabilities and maturity, as you move through those clinical phases. So thank you.
And finally, leverage partners and industry experts that have done this hundreds of times, rather than maybe employees that have done this 2 or 3 times at previous places of employment. Utilize technology and automation to build the guardrails you need for your quality and IT frameworks, and look at each investment relative to the goals of the organization rather than how it's going to serve your functional area.